So in the relevancy of my previous video, I thought it'd be quite topical to talk about Attack on Titan's quote-unquote next generation. I want to start this off by saying, if you haven't already noticed, I'm not the biggest fan of next generations or sequels that don't necessarily have any context or pre-existing build-up in the original story. I personally think that the type of endings that kind of allude to a quote-unquote next generations is very half-assed. It's not necessarily written extremely well, and it's kind of like a cop-out. It's a little bit too open-ended, and it leaves a very bad taste on what could potentially be a very successful and original story. This is kind of why I have a fear for what Attack on Titan could potentially become. As we slowly move forward into the finale of the story, obviously going to its conclusion, we still obviously have quite a bit of time left. It's very worrying to know that it could potentially go into a marketing ploy or some sort of milking ploy to potentially continue the series past its expiration date. What I mean by this is I don't think a next generation specifically suits Attack on Titan's story. I feel like trying to elongate it past its original process or its original ending to try and maybe make more beneficial means out of it, or try to make more money or more popularity, etc., is a little bit too much. And unfortunately, it's very disappointing to see authors potentially get kind of pressured sometimes into writing this way or dictating their ending to more so suit an open ending climax to help kind of segue into potential more monetization for their story, or for the businesses that are potentially pressuring these authors to dictate their story so these businesses can make more money, animate it, etc., and kind of continue the legacy of a pre-existing massive name. A good example of this is obviously Naruto with the Boruto situation. Now, I haven't read Boruto, nor have I seen the anime, but I heard it's rather successful. I heard it's kind of its own story, and it's progressively getting better and better, and there's a lot of people that enjoy it and that make content on it, and I think that's a good thing. However, what I don't necessarily think is a good thing is how kind of Kishimoto handled his ending, as I think it's a very quote-unquote half-assed way of doing it. Now, I'm not too sure of the semantics of his ending, whether he wanted to do this specifically, if he had it envisioned the entire time, or if he was pressured into doing it, but in every sort of aspect, his ending is extremely open. It's not necessarily a conclusion to the story, and more so even kind of traversing into that ending is completely jarring. It kind of feels like it was attached onto the story to kind of try and close off loose ends, but at the same time leaving everything completely open to make more money and to continue a story that is not its original. That's not necessarily in a disrespectful way. Maybe Kishimoto wanted to do that, but the ripple effect and the success from Boruto has definitely traversed over to a lot of different authors that have kind of copied the same thing, or has used that same sort of format to conclude their story, and I don't really like the trend. I really don't. Bleach done the exact same thing, which I thought was extremely unnecessary, but ultimately leaves it open to the idea of it potentially getting another anime or another manga, maybe not even done by the original author, Kubo, to make more money and to monetize off that. Now, people eat that stuff up. They enjoy that because it's like it's more of their favorite story. It's, like a sequel, but I like to cherish the original story to its full degree, and rather that have a complete conclusion than to have an open ending conclusion to segue into a half-assed sequel, more or less. Don't get me wrong, it's not entirely always too bad. I just feel like a lot of authors are starting to do it. The whole time skip ending with their main characters grown up and having children is very generic, it's very simplistic, and it's not necessarily a conclusion whatsoever, even if they try and segue into a next generation or not. All I'll say is that if you kind of go from a final fight, a massive climatic fight of the story, to a massive time skip, you can realistically tell that the author didn't really know how to segue into an ending like that, and most likely that was their only option, is the time skip. There's a lot of different things that come into play, obviously, and how they kind of break up their story and how they want it to ultimately reach a conclusion, but it's very hard for us as readers to kind of understand on why they would do something like that. It generally seems like it's a kind of a piece that was never connected to the story whatsoever, but it was kind of in the author's best interest to implement it so they could potentially make more money or make a lot more people happier, or maybe the author didn't know how to end the story, so they kind of give it some artificial ending which makes people happy because people love it, but at the same time it's not necessarily a conclusion. Now that was a little bit long-winded, but it helps give you context on why this correlates to Attack on Titan so heavily, as both the Attack on Titan anime and the manga are extremely successful worldwide. Not only that, but they have multiple different anime and manga spin-offs that aren't necessarily connected to the story. I believe some are and some aren't, and those are extremely successful as well. Not only that, but we got revealed to the quote-unquote final panel of the story that the author has actually drawn up, and for some reason, I guess to kind of bring a lot more hype to the conclusion or the climax of the story, they actually showed us this panel, and it's obviously a rough drawing, it's not entirely finished, but they even showed us the text for what the character is saying, and realistically kind of spoiled the whole ending of the story. At least it kind of brings your ideas to some sort of conclusion on how the story is going to end, and it kind of connects that dot, like where your theory starts and where the story ends, and you can somewhat build a successful bridge more or less with a lot of missing information, but regardless, you can build that bridge. I found it very weird that they spoiled it. It's basically an older character that we do not know who it is, holding a child in their arms and basically saying, "You are free now," or something along those lines. Now, this panel could evidently change. It may not be the legitimate final panel, or it's obviously not the final version. The text may change, a lot of things may change about it, but I found it very odd that they actually showcased it. That child and that character has obviously led to a lot of speculation that that is Eren Yeager's child, and basically telling his child that he is free. So whatever Eren has done, whether it be kind of getting rid of all of the Titan shifting abilities, or connecting the world together, or dismembering the world, or whatever Eren has done to reach that point of considering himself free, especially his potential child, you know, he's gone through that effort and he has succeeded in that effort. There's also other theories that that child and that person is not anyone related to Eren. It could be a distant future relative, or maybe a distant future person that maybe carries the same ideology as Eren. Maybe that's a future Attack Titan shifter that has kind of gained Eren Yeager's ideology, which I think would also be extremely interesting. What I hope with seeing the final panel is that anime studios or even other magazine companies don't kind of pressure the author to continue the story just because of the way the ending is kind of dictating itself at the moment. I think that panel in itself seems to be a really, really good way to end the story, considering it is the last thing you will evidently look at. It's going to be very impactful. It's going to be very emotional, I imagine, and I hope it's not squandered by the idea of trying to wrap on some next generation's nonsense. Like, that is something that I hope is completely void of that final chapter. Whether it's an anime, whether it's a manga adaptation, whether it's a OVA or a spin-off with that child, I hope they kind of just avoid it completely and let Attack on Titan reach its full conclusion. Sure, you can go back and make spin-offs and everything relating to the story, but anything kind of directly connected and considered a quote-unquote sequel, I believe they shouldn't do whatsoever. As much as people love a lot more content, maybe people want to see it, which is perfectly fine at the end of the day, it's a very odd thing, and a lot of the times it completely dismembers the original story and the importance of the original story, and I can't kind of stress that enough. As a person that has read so many stories that has tried to do a really good time skip child ending, and they ultimately fall extremely flat and evidently belittle their own story. Will Attack on Titan turn out that way? I certainly hope not. I really hope it doesn't go down that route. I hope that final panel with that one character and the child is evidently the conclusion of the story, at least for a decent amount of time. And hopefully it's built in a way that is actually conclusive, it has a lot of emotion, and it's probably very safe to assume that it is going to be very emotional. It is going to be very conclusive, and I honestly can't ask for anything more than that. A very conclusive ending that gives us as readers a very nice everlasting taste in our mouths from reading that story. You know, with the businesses, I get it. You know, Attack on Titan is a very appetizing story that is extremely successful, and you want to make as much money off it as you possibly can, but please, for the love of God, do not disregard its original story. Do not try and segue some half-assed next generations. If you do want to do that, right, at least have some sort of integrity, pay homage to the original story, and actually connect the story with a sequel that makes a lot of sense. Put some thought and heart into it, and your next generations could be a really big thing. But please don't try and milk it for more than it's worth, because it's very detrimental to the overall series and its legacy that it could potentially leave behind. With that being said, that's basically it. Let me know how you feel about Attack on Titan potentially getting a next generations. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you want to see it? Do you not want to see it? I don't know. But I'm actually going to end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.